This guy asks me, how do you make a poem? I say, one word at a time, with or without rhyme. He says, you know what would make a good poem? A guy is sitting drunk at a bar, but he's making sense. And here I am thinking, I wish that guy were here now. But you know, you never know what can make a poem.
Welcome to another episode of Poets in Montana. And today our guest in the studio is Bruce Morton. And Bruce is a poet who is from Bozeman, Montana. And outside of that, Bruce, I don't know a whole lot about you. So we talked about it just a moment ago, and you said you came from the East Coast?
I grew up in the New York City area, went to high school and university in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. And then you moved to Bozeman?
Well, there were some stops in between, military jobs in Pennsylvania, Minnesota. The last half of my life has been spent in Montana.
Okay. Yeah, you sent me your manuscript that here the other day, and I started going through it, and it seemed like we have a lot in common. Obviously, you're a little bit older than me.
Just turned 75.
There you go. Yeah. And but your background, your heritage, you have a little Irish blood in you.
Some Irish, some German, and some Russian Jewish.
And some Russian Jewish, that's right. I remember that. I mean, really, I guess what I noticed in your work is that it just reminded me a lot of what I do myself in terms of writing poetry, and that you just kind of chronicled a lot of your life in this particular book anyway, Planet Mort. Yeah,
well, it's cheaper than analysis. I don't know if it's as effective or not, but and it's sort of my way of processing the world around me.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of what that was the thing. When did you? I fell in love with it when I was in that regard when I was in high school, and it allowed me the ability at that time to do just that. And it was pretty much a private thing.
Yeah, I likewise. I think probably 11th grade.
Uh-huh.
I discovered Whitman and Frost, and started to dabble, and
yeah,
still dabbling.
Yeah, and they are examples of poets, I guess, too, that I enjoyed at that time, mainly because they were similar. They did that sort of thinking and talking to themselves. And
well, they were both accessible, and Whitman sort of gave carte blanche to let go of form, mm-hmm. and Frost gave an example of how to work with form but still be accessible.
Right, and Whitman sort of this just embracing of
mm-hmm.
of everything, and Frost more contained.
Yeah, and controlled.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let me see. I made a whole stack of stuff here. If you were interested in reading something, this one I found further back in the manuscript. I like the way the manuscript is arranged too, but you want to give that one a go?
You bet. This is from echoes from my grandfather's garage. He was a farmer, subsistence farmer in Connecticut, and by the time grandkids arrived, he had pretty much sold the farm, but still had a shed with a lot of his old accoutrements, tools. So the title of this is The Grinding Wheel as Family History. Yes, Gramps did have an axe to grind, as well as all the other tools of the farmer's trade were there hanging. So where it stood in his garage, I remember as if today, a large sandstone disc suspended in that metal dark rusted frame, not used long since for its intent. Metal seat and pedal invited me, a curious me there ready to set the thick wheel in motion, foot pumping as to a drum beat. I take down the different tools, relics of pain and ache and cost, a family raised and land sold. The pumping pedal thrumming as I play steel on stone with purpose, so slowly drawing each blade across and back as the wheel sparks its song. Hot notes honed between sharp and flat, so perfect we call it the edge.
Nice. Yeah. Nice poem. The recollection of that, I remember having a similar experience. The one that I remember wasn't a metal frame. It was kind of set in a wood frame. You know, I mean, it had obviously some metal, you know, the axle blocks and whatnot, but it was it was made of wood, and there was a tractor seat on it, but it must have been a homemade job, kind of. There's wordplay also in your poetry that I really get a kick out of, and I thought, well, you know, the one we just talked about earlier. I hate to just keep feeding you these things, but I mean, I got a pile of them here.
I'm a glutton. Keep feeding.
Yeah, there you go. And in this one, you know, because I found a lot of wordplay. A lot of your poems involve wordplay, and that last one had a little, but this one definitely.
This poem is titled Strokes, and it was inspired by a friend who unfortunately experienced a stroke. Stroke, or strokes. When fortune clots, a stroke of luck may bring wealth or accolade that we may or may not accept or bear with grace. With luck, it will not be the kind that freezes the brain or dams the river that discourses through the universe that is life's blood. Deny dysphagia, better to speak the gratuitous compliment or encouragement. Strokes, after all, are the aphrodisiac of ego, even of id, the climax of our daily roll and roil, the pulse of deduction, reduction, reproduction. Then there is the stroke of genius, music of delight, stroke of pen, sound and word, come the stroke of midnight when things go quiet and are dark. What do we make of this? Do we stroke our egos, or do we quicken the stroke that we row into oblivion?
Into oblivion. Wordplay. Kind of like kick the can with language. But into oblivion, we had this conversation briefly a minute ago also about just that. You mentioned that your early work was much darker than where we are now in Planet Mort.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I could demonstrate that if you wish.
I think that'd be terrific.
These are very short, so
Read a couple.
yeah, I can read a couple very quickly. This is the Cynic's love song. Love is a funny thing, but no one is laughing. Love is a song to sing, but no one is harmonizing. Upon the proposal there were tears. Upon the exchange of vows there are fears. Upon the divorce decree there will be cheers. This poem is titled Apatheism. I have faith in what I know, in what we do and how we fare. There is credibility in our ability, our rationality, our fallibility, and of course, our vulnerability. Again, God knows I do not know, and God knows I do not care. And I know it does not matter. So let the mystery remain mysterious. Amen. And this is called Quantum Life. Like cats in a box, at each moment, every moment, our lives are at once simultaneously getting longer, getting shorter, neither righter nor wronger. And when the lid is lifted and we discover that which is uncertain, that is, a certain dread, vile or beautiful, but certainly not dead. And I'll read one more titled Vertigo, if I can find it here. Maybe it's not in here. Entropy. Entropy would be concentration, if not for the deficit of attention to detail, to the matter at hand, to everything for that matter. What was it now? What was the point? What is to be done? What is to be? What is? What?
A lot of time in the old noggin there, in those poems.
Yeah, well.
Typical space for a poet to be in.
Sometimes healthy, sometimes not.
Exactly. Okay. When did that book come out?
Late 2014.
Okay. And these poems that are in Mort are post that.
Most of them are post that or written and reworked, but nothing that's in here.
Okay. What was the change in mood or impetus or poetry, do you think? I mean, did anything happen in?
Well, this was written or published, and these poems were written, some way back. Some were published in the late 70s, early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Not too long before this book was published, I had a cardiac incident and got me thinking about vulnerability, mortality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the poems in what I hope becomes a future book deal more with reflection of childhood, family dynamics, grandchildren.
A life.
A life, but there's shade in that as well, but certainly a lot of sunshine as well.
Right. Well, and just the bringing in of all those other personalities and spaces will broaden everything and obviously lighten things up. I mean, it's like if you're seriously depressed, which I've been a few times, it's always good to try to get outside of yourself or to just do something. Just do something.
Yeah, and I tend to, with a bit of irreverence, try to see the humor / absurdity and
Yeah. What else are you gonna
in the
do?
world. Yeah.
Like whistling through the graveyard, or laughing, I guess, in the face of death, or whatever. I don't know. The one experience that I found in here, of course, and I'm always interested in because I never did any military service. I was never in the service at all, and so but I've known a lot of people, a lot of my friends have been and have written about it in different ways. But it was interesting, your work in here reminded me of just kind of as an outsider's point of view, what I thought I would probably have been like if I would have done that, you know. Do you want to read anything like, let me see, I picked a couple out. I know. Oh yeah, that's a good one.
I have some handy if you.
Oh well, yeah. Grab something and read some of those. A couple of them. That problem was that there was too damn many poems for me to choose from, so I've just got this stack of massive. Flags.
Oh, that's
The bellicose vein.
okay. Well, the bellicose vein, I think, is in here as well. But you know, the bellicose vein is an old one.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the Army, went in early May '69, got out early June '72, so a little over 3 years during the Vietnam conflict, which I was fortunate enough to avoid participating directly in.
Mm-hmm.
Spent my time overseas in Germany on the east-west German border. The bellicose vein, which or why matters not, it would be best to forget the whole damn lot. But what do you want to bet that we will go for a rerun? We will do as we have done, enlist the starry-eyed young, stack them like cordwood, tight in the barrack bunks, prepared to feed the flame. We will play the Patriots game, wave the flag and sing the song, fight for right and right wrong. And it will not be long, again, before we exhume the past and bury the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think it has legs.
Oh yeah. That's why it's so good to hear.
Flags is fairly recent, and you can probably hear my teeth grinding behind the lines. Flags. Don't get me started, okay? I'm a self-starter. So I wonder, no, I am left in wonder, why it is that neighbors feel compelled to fly the flag. Are they converting the castle to a fort? No. Or perhaps an embassy. That's it. Every person an ambassador. Asylum seekers welcome. Well, no. Perhaps it is pride. We have, after all, won every war we have fought, except the last 4 or so. So what is the cause of this display, this flap of red, white, and blue, this effusion of stars and stripes? For whatever reason, whatever season. Is it that patriotism must be affirmed or confirmed, lest neighbors judge your banner smaller than theirs? Size, we know, after all, matters. No matter that it flies in tatters. And the children, they play their games, learn their songs. Oh, say, I've got a dog, and Jingo is his name. Oh, Jingo, Jingo is his name. Oh.
Yeah, funny and not. Yeah, and of course, part of the fascination with that part of the section of your manuscript and those poems and the one you're about to read is, I've been watching this Ken Burns thing on PBS, this U.S. and the Holocaust, right?
Right.
Everybody should be watching that.
Yeah, I have a poem that has never, for want of a bad pun, been able to float. So it's still perpetually in draft. Again, no pun, but it's about the St. Louis incident,
Yeah, right.
and which is
the ship, the rescue ship.
that went nowhere. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This poem is called Violence. The thing about violence, ugly as it is that violence is effective. Whether it be a whisper to a shaken down shopkeep, a hand to a bruised spouse, the taunted threat of a schoolyard bully, or bullet to the temple in the town square, cold. Quiet or raucous, shouted or shot, martyrs are made by pulling the trigger, displayed and left to the gravedigger. The protester protests no more. The fighter is gone, the battle won, opposition undone. A pall of silence blankets those left to live in fear that it may happen again, happen to them. So it is that faux pas peace or faux peace settles as a specter that haunts, that stills past and potential until there is nothing left but husks of despair and seeds of courage.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just so much to go down in that whole topic. Yesterday, was it yesterday or the day before, I saw something online, you know, on one of those little post things that they put out there, and it was about I think it was Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick, who basically, when asked about, you know, why he makes the kind of films he makes or whatever, he said, well, he's just continually fascinated with the violence of humanity and the fact that that it's, you know, the idea that this is going to go away or that we're going to evolve out of this and create the perfect utopian society is just, you know, he didn't see that as a reality. He just felt it was more interesting to focus on these animals, right? I mean, I think of the scene in 2001 with the apes and the bone or whatever, and then the flash into man launching himself into space again. I don't know if that'll ever resolve itself. It's not ours to figure out, I guess, but it is kind of one of the fundamental questions that we're always wrestling with.
Seems to be a fundamental trait as well, not on an individual level, but certainly on a social spectral level. You know, what we rationalize as inhumane is very human.
Right.
And
and on an individual level, when it comes into our world, we can understand it, particularly if it's coming at us. You know, we understand it less if we're the one perpetrating it on someone else. I'm sure selfishness, just the whole concept.
well, if you're not a psychopath, your response to a psychopath is essentially what that poem was talking about. And a lot of the damage that we see in veterans who have seen real combat has to do with what they've had to do in order to survive that experience.
Right. Yeah.
Totally. And it's a disconnect that's required, and then many people don't have the ability to reconnect.
Right. Yeah. Particularly after exhausting amount of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Of which, you know, in a way, childhood is. Which to get me back into your
Good segue.
your manuscript of poems about different things. You write about your parents in different poems in here and your experience growing up. You want to read one?
You bet. This is called The Old Lady. At age 10, my mother watched wide-eyed her eldest brother drown, attempting to rescue. 3 years later, no one could save her mother. She would spend the rest of her life treading water in the shallows of the night. Where sleep flowed in phantom ripples, no one knew she was a Jew. Who knew? She told no one and found that goy, Dad, a Lutheran who had a Catholic father, no less. Brother lost, mother lost, innocence the cost. She clutched close the shawl of her anxieties to her daily, always prepared for whatever could maybe happen, or not. When she died, she was at a loss. Neither she nor anyone else knew who she really was.
Yeah. Yeah. And we spend a lifetime trying to figure that out, even though we know we can't.
This is titled The Nightstand. He stands there still, framed next to the bed, tarnished, chipped gilt, where nightmares wept and sleep sometimes slept. Echoes sound distant in the penumbra of cheap whiskey, of family history, of filial mystery. The tight-jawed visage of grandfatherly sobriety, glaring, daring memory. My father, the son, would carry him drunk, the body dead weight, upstairs to his nightstand to fend and sleep off his Irish demons, transfigured wholly into the ghost of himself. There it is, the faith of our fathers, who each, in his own turn, was a son. Such is the irony of agony, the tragedy of progeny. And here I am, in the middle of the night, seeking some dark insight to gauge there and my rage, taking my nightstand, writing a sober poem.
Yeah. Yeah, the effects of generational trauma.
Yeah, well, yeah, I've spent a lot of time. I'm not sure I've reached any authoritative conclusions about the effect of being the son of an alcoholic on my father, and the effect of being the son of an alcoholic on me.
Right.
But that goes back to the analysis.
Right. Right. And just it also makes me think about what we were talking about just moments ago, which was like the U.S. and our history and where we come from, the stuff that so many people right now in the political spectrum don't want us to deal with or talk about or think about, the fact of our history basically, and how we've traumatized a lot of different people, but don't seem to want to take responsibility for it, so it keeps coming back in these waves and haunting us, over and over again. Here we are again.
We are us.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's hard to get rid of. And sometimes we go about it with, attempts to figure things out. We wind up in asking other people to help us out.
This is a poem that thus far has been unpublishable. It's not particularly new, and I'm not sure if it deserves a trigger warning or not.
You've submitted it?
Not recently. I sort of gave up on it.
But I mean many times,
Yeah.
and it's never ever
No. And it finally occurred to me that maybe being naive or insensitive, that there are certainly those who would respond to this viscerally and might find it unsettling to the point of being damaged. I don't know. But anyway, this poem has been titled variously, what it is now, Therapist, or the Rapist, with no spacing. You decline to recline. You will not lay, but may lie. The therapist gives you no space to breathe, to see yourself for yourself. Any self-defense is turned against you. Relentless. He wants to enter your mind, be inside your head. You want to trust. He says you must. But he presses with each thrust, each query you sense so intense, it distresses, disturbs, hurts. You resist as best you can. He misunderstands resistance and will not disengage until his speculation is satisfied. His curiosity goes flaccid and your anxiety placid. There is nothing more to say, no reason to stay. He wants to explore more, another appointment, a next time. You feel like a psychology whore, putting out on your own dime. But you will come back, because the pain feels and the guilt peels, veneer of memory from the fiction of fact.
Wow. Yeah, you see, of course, part of it, I guess, is trying to plow through maybe the entire manuscript. When I first read that, I naively didn't get the metaphor. And of course, if I guess the title would have been Rapist, then it would have been much more obvious that was maybe the underlying metaphor for the poem. But yeah, no, that was, so you caught me off guard on that one. Yeah. And I could see after you read it why that might be triggering for some people. Did you send it out? When did you title it Therapist?
It's gone back and forth.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I've sort of hope it appears in a volume sometime, but I've sort of given up sending it out to magazines.
Right. Well, I think it can be like all poems, I guess. You know, I mean, it can be experienced in different ways, and it will be experienced in different ways by different people. But the title would definitely.
Yeah. Well, the danger is if you're sending out several, that if the editor finds it off-putting, the others sort of go down the tubes with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Totally. Yeah. All it takes is one to sink the boat. Well, and in that line, I guess we were talking earlier, and you did mention that you were submitting a lot back in the 70s, early 80s.
Late 70s, early 80s, yeah, and had reasonable success.
Yeah, and this has been before you had moved out west.
Yes.
Right. And what I mean, I guess we never talked about this at all in terms of your bio details. What was your motive for moving to Montana?
Job at Montana State University.
Oh, okay, all right. So you taught there.
I did a little teaching. I mostly worked in the library.
Okay. All right. So then you retired from there.
I did.
Right. Did you know Mr. Keeler?
Not well, but I knew Greg.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I did many of the faculty there.
Right. So now what the hell was I asking you? I lose track of my where I was going with that. So anyway, okay. So we were talking about publishing or whatever. You get out here and you're working as a librarian or whatever at Montana State University, and You're still writing?
Never stopped writing. When we moved to Montana, I stopped sending things out. So essentially, there was a 30-year hiatus of publication. There are one or two things that have come out during that period, but it was local folks saying, "Do you have a piece for something?"
Right.
Something local. And it was sort of a Rip Van Winkle experience when I decided to re-enter that market, for want of a better word, because it had completely changed.
Okay.
There weren't many self-addressed
Right.
stamped envelopes,
Right.
submittable. It's like, what is this? And had to sort of reacculturate myself to that environment.
Right. But you found it to be much easier, didn't you?
In terms of the mechanics, certainly.
Yeah.
One of the downsides of that 30-year hiatus, what little cachet my stuff had back in that 70s and 80s, it went down the tubes,
Right.
and so it was basically a starting up all over again.
Right. Yeah, that just the I mean, I pretty much sort of kind of gave up on the whole sending stuff out also at a certain point, just because it just the burden of it, the task, the chore, and keeping track, and I had another job, and because most of us do, so I just kind of gave up on it, and then at some point later on, the more people I got to know, and some people involved in small mags and stuff, then they'll make a request, and they'll say, "Well, have you got something to send or whatever?" It's like, "Oh, sure, I've got piles of stuff." But
Yeah, one of the things that had changed environmentally is now it seems to be generally acceptable to do simultaneous submissions, which in the old days was completely forbidden.
right,
And I still don't do it, partly not necessarily as an ethical matter, but it's just too damn hard to keep track of.
right,
So one at a time.
yeah, and it's well, in everything almost. It's like we used to keep a checkbook. You used to have stuff came on a regular basis to you, and it was physical. And it was a lot easier for me to keep track of things back then. And now that everything sort of happens online and everything happens within a 5-minute soundbite or 24-hour clock, I lose track of stuff, and I don't try hard enough to keep track of things anymore, or I don't know how to do it, I guess, in a digital way very effectively. And
Yeah, I have an Excel spreadsheet that I use. And,
yeah.
if
Those things always scared the hell out of me.
this is a very simple one.
Well, is there, at this point in time, is there anything you want to talk about specifically, or anything that comes to mind that you thought you wanted to?
No, there's a series of 3 poems that I wouldn't mind having the opportunity to read. They deal with my grandchildren.
Oh, yeah.
And they're very different.
Yeah.
And they as people, of course, fascinate me.
Yeah.
And sometimes they give me insights, that I wouldn't otherwise have had. There's a 4th grandchild who doesn't have a poem dedicated to her yet. I keep working on it. It's a hard one. But for 3 I do. This is titled Rabbit Hole, and it's for Elsa. The lot is vacant and dry. Her little legs fly ahead. It is sudden. She stops, drops to a squat, stares down at the hole there in the ground. She's absolutely still. Weeds barely move in the breeze. So, too, her dark Medusa hair frozen in the bright sunlight. Her world is small, but she is worldly. She knows Easter Bunny, and Peter, and Flopsy, and Mopsy, and bugs, perhaps. But nothing of Pukas. No mad or jousting rabbits, no torturer rabbits, nor the executioner rabbits that illuminate medieval manuscripts, or holy hand grenades tossed by inept crusaders in chainmail, or a vested white rabbit. Oh dear. My measured pace catches up. She has not a clue, yet she knew. She could intuit. She turns, very deliberate, looks back up over her shoulder at me, who casts a shadow. She furrows her brow, points first at me and then at the hole. Do not go in there. She means it. After that experience, I understood where the inspiration for Alice in Wonderland came from.
Yeah.
This is titled Church Camp for Stella. She's my oldest granddaughter. So she tells me that church camp has rules. Who would have guessed? Agape, she cannot believe it. She tells me the rules for church camp will not permit bra straps to show. Easy solution, she tells me. She will not wear a bra. That will show them. And can you believe it? She asks me, shorts must come to the knee, she says. She says she does not have any shorts that long. Can you believe it? She asks again. No, I cannot. Yes, I can. She is just starting to get the hang of this teen thing. Angst, rebellion, and spirit. I can only hope, okay, pray. There is no ghost of a chance that any father or son will confound patristic and Eucharistic. And then this one for my grandson who was adopted from the Congo. And this was a difficult poem to write, painful poem to write, and the experience likewise, both in terms of his experience, my experience, and the interactive experience. That's what I'm trying to get here. The title is First Aid for Rocky. Bruised innocence leaves soul and conscience lacerated. My pale experience pales at first aid. How do I explain to this sweet child, born where the heart of darkness was, explain what darkness of heart is? Do I merely say that some children are stupid and say stupid things because their parents are haters? I answer his questions as best I can. No, all Africans do not have fat lips. You do not have fat lips. You do not. No, you do not have gorilla skin. Your skin is beautiful. Our skin is many shades, all beautiful. Why did he call me the N-word? A hug and tear hardly seem enough to salve his pain or mine. Oh, that simple decency would be simply black and white instead of a matter of black or white.
Yeah, which takes us back to the racism card
Yep.
again, right?
Yeah, it is.
It's just the fear, I guess.
Well, it's part of the fabric of who we are, unfortunately, as not individuals, but as a culture or society.
Tribal sort of mentality.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that's where it has its roots, I guess. You know, if you go back to just a sort of a tribalism, smaller societies. But this is, this is the great experiment, right? I mean, it's still ongoing. This particular spot, this country, this idea, give me your tired, that whole thing. And it's still going through all the same struggles that it's always gone through.
Well, it's in a sense, it's social entropy. There's a phenomenon in the library world called twigging, where you start with a discipline, say biology, and then you'll go to anatomy and entomology. It starts to break down into subdisciplines, and the subdisciplines break down into sub-subdisciplines.
Mm-hmm.
And there are publications that reflect this.
Mm-hmm.
And culturally, we do it in other ways. We do it based on race. We do it based on religion. We do it on institutional affiliation. We do it on
Musical preference?
musical preference types,
Yeah.
etc. And you keep defining, and then there are likes or prejudices attached to this phenomenon. And
Right.
some of them are more hurtful or virulent than others, racism being certainly one of them.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, it's not that obviously 100 years ago, the face-to-face-ism of that phenomenon was pretty brutal, but we've kind of gotten back into the easier aspect of acting that brutal, but doing it in this texting context.
Well, it's easy in places like Missoula or Bozeman to assuage ourselves with that there is none of that here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's deep-rooted and it's latent, and I felt at a loss in terms of my experience. I did not experience that.
Right.
Whereas black children who have black parents are likely to have, who have likely experienced that, are able to prepare their children and better empathize. I felt much at a loss.
Yeah, I don't know that they're, I'm sure that they have better things probably to convey, I suppose, to their children or their grandchildren or whoever it may be because of that. But at the same time, they've got to be at a total loss too, right? I mean,
Right.
And they have been all their life.
And too many places right now in our culture, we're trying to ban the books that address these in our libraries.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another issue. That's another hour talk, just the library end of things. Mm-hmm. What's going on there? Well, we're probably getting, not too far away from wrapping this whole conversation up, and I've got a whole bunch of poems here still to read. Anything that else that you personally want to go for? I got a kick out of the alcohol too. There was obviously generational thing and cultural thing. Mm-hmm. Plenty of drinking in some of these poems.
Well, there was a period in my younger, wilder years where I indulged more than I should have.
One I don't have here is the Studebaker poem. Oh. That was funny. I mean, just that whole, it was a great poem about the old Studebaker. Mm-hmm. 51, is that what it was? Yeah. You probably don't know that by heart.
No, but I can find it if you want me to.
Well, whatever. When there's these, a couple of short ones here also. One's more wordplay than the other one is, but they're both poems, wordplay.
Well, let me. 2/5. Reminded of the worn cliche that those who can are the doers and those who cannot are teachers, I fixate on those two bottles of doers and teacher's whiskey, next to each other on the shelf, waiting to be poured. I wonder which one will be neat, with water or on ice. We are not talking the top shelf here, not single malts, but blended, with a burn and a buzz, but no savor, just done and taught.
T-A-U-T.
Yep. And this is Irish whiskey. This fine Irish whiskey has become gold in the pot, a distillation of themselves. Thrice done, once for the Father, then for the Son, and finally then for the Holy Ghost. The holy water pours from bottle to glass, a wee sip, first on the lip, then on the tip of the tongue, until sip becomes swallow and brogue's breath breathes heart and home. Slantya. And here. Okay, this is titled Studebaker. It was a 1951 coupe, 3 on the column, as was the norm back in the day. Pea green, matte pea green to be precise. We called it the Jolly Green Ho-Ho. The rocket ship nose, the questionable brakes, and dubious thermostat. It was not all that hot, but kind of cool. The armrests in the back flipped open. Each would hold almost a case of beer. Somehow that seemed significant.
Kind of cool. Somehow that seems significant. Well, this has been a pleasure.
As for
Bruce.
me.
Yes. So hopefully in the next year or so, you'll be able to find a book of poems called, tentatively, Planet Mort. Bruce Morton, thanks for being here.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm flattered.
We'll see you again next time on with another poet in Montana. Bye.
A lifetime filled